The idea of cloning a dinosaur like a Tyrannosaurus rex fascinates many of us. Movies show scientists bringing these giant creatures back to life. But is this really possible with the science we have today in 2025? The simple answer is no, not right now. The biggest hurdle is finding dinosaur DNA. DNA is like a recipe book for building a living thing. It contains all the instructions. For dinosaurs, these recipe books are incredibly old. They have been gone for about 66 million years. That is a very, very long time for something as delicate as DNA to survive intact and ready for us to read. DNA molecules are complex, but they are not invincible. Over time, they break down. This process is called DNA decay. Think of it like an ancient scroll. Left for millions of years, it would crumble to dust. The same happens to DNA. Sunlight, water, and bacteria can all damage it. Scientists have calculated something called a half-life for DNA. This means that after a certain period, half of the DNA bonds will be broken. For DNA, the half-life is estimated to be about 521 years. This might sound like a long time, but dinosaurs died out 66 million years ago. That is many, many half-lives. So, after millions of years, any dinosaur DNA would be in tiny, shattered pieces. It would not be a complete, usable blueprint. Imagine trying to rebuild a giant, complex spaceship from just a few microscopic nuts and bolts, without the full instruction manual. Even if we found these tiny DNA fragments, perhaps preserved in amber like in the movies, they would be far too degraded. Scientists have found DNA from creatures like mammoths, which died out much more recently, perhaps only thousands of years ago. Their DNA is better preserved, because it was often frozen in ice, a much gentler environment than a warm, wet jungle. Therefore, the first major challenge is the DNA itself. We don't have a complete dinosaur genome. A genome is the entire set of DNA instructions for an organism. Without it, we cannot even begin the process of cloning. Some might suggest we could fill in the gaps with DNA from modern animals, like birds or reptiles. Birds are indeed distant relatives of dinosaurs. However, this would not create a true dinosaur. It would be a new hybrid creature, and we wouldn't know how it would develop or behave. The dream of seeing a real T-Rex stomp the earth again remains firmly in the realm of science fiction for now, due to this fundamental DNA problem. Let's imagine, just for a moment, that we somehow found perfect dinosaur DNA. The next enormous challenge would be finding a suitable egg. Cloning involves taking the nucleus from a cell, which contains the DNA, and putting it into an egg cell whose own nucleus has been removed. This reprogrammed egg then needs to develop. For dinosaurs, this is a huge problem. Dinosaurs laid eggs, true. But what kind of eggs were they? Were they like bird eggs or reptile eggs or something unique? We don't have any living dinosaur eggs to study and understand their specific needs for development. Modern birds are the closest living relatives to dinosaurs. So, could we use a bird egg, like an ostrich egg? It sounds plausible, but it is very unlikely to work. An ostrich egg is designed for an ostrich embryo. Its chemistry, its shell structure, its nutrient supply, everything is finely tuned for a baby ostrich. Dinosaur DNA would have very different requirements. The signals between the dinosaur DNA and the ostrich egg cytoplasm, the material surrounding the nucleus, would likely be incompatible. It would be like trying to run complex alien software on your home computer. It just wouldn't compute correctly, leading to failure. Even if, by some miracle, a cloned dinosaur embryo started to develop, what kind of creature would we get? It might face severe health problems. The environment today is very different from the Mesozoic era. The oxygen levels in the atmosphere were different. The plants were different. The diseases and microbes were different. A cloned dinosaur might have a weak immune system, unable to cope with modern pathogens. It could suffer from developmental issues because our current environment doesn't match the conditions its DNA is programmed for. It might be born with defects or be too weak to survive. And what about its behavior? Dinosaurs were wild animals. Their behaviors were shaped by millions of years of evolution in their specific environments. A cloned dinosaur would have no parents to learn from. It would rely purely on instinct. How would a velociraptor born in a lab behave? Would it be confused, aggressive, or terrified? We simply don't know. It could be dangerous to humans and other animals, or it might be so disoriented and stressed by its unnatural surroundings that it couldn't thrive. These are serious considerations beyond just the technical challenge of creating one. If we somehow overcame all the scientific hurdles and cloned a dinosaur, what would happen if we released it into today's world? The ecological impact could be massive and unpredictable. Imagine a large carnivorous dinosaur like a Spinosaurus. What would it eat? Modern animals have evolved without giant dinosaur predators. Native species could be decimated. Ecosystems are delicately balanced. Introducing such a powerful ancient predator could throw everything into chaos, much like introducing any invasive species, but on a much grander and potentially more dangerous scale. Entire food webs could collapse under the strain. Alternatively, the dinosaur itself might struggle terribly to survive. The modern world is not its home. The climate is different, the available food sources are not what its digestive system evolved to process. It might not be able to find enough food or the right kind of food. It could fall prey to modern diseases against which it has no immunity. Perhaps our modern environment, with its pollutants and altered landscapes, would be toxic to it. Instead of a fearsome monster, we might have a confused, sick animal that suffers greatly. It's a cosmic mismatch, an ancient being thrust into an alien future. This brings us to the profound ethical questions. Is it right to bring an animal back from extinction, especially one that has been gone for 66 million years? Just because we might develop the technology, does that mean we should use it? What purpose would it serve? Scientific curiosity? Entertainment? These reasons might not be enough to justify potentially creating an animal that could suffer or that could cause harm to our existing ecosystems. We have a responsibility to the life that currently exists on our planet. Bringing back ancient life forms could have unforeseen and negative consequences for them. Furthermore, what would our responsibility be towards a cloned dinosaur? Would it be an exhibit in a zoo, a subject for research, or something else? If it is intelligent, would it have rights? These are not easy questions. We struggle with conservation ethics for animals alive today. Adding a creature from deep time would complicate these discussions immensely. The potential for suffering, both for the cloned animal and for existing species, must be weighed very carefully. The allure of seeing a living dinosaur is strong, but our ethical responsibilities as stewards of life on Earth are paramount and must guide our actions. While cloning a dinosaur is far beyond our current reach, cloning technology itself is very real. Scientists have successfully cloned various mammals, such as sheep, dogs, and even endangered species. The focus for de-extinction efforts today is on much more recently extinct animals. For example, there is serious research into the possibility of bringing back the woolly mammoth. Mammoths died out only a few thousand years ago, not millions. This means their DNA is often much better preserved, especially specimens found frozen in permafrost in places like Siberia. Their DNA is far more complete than any dinosaur fragment. Moreover, mammoths have very close living relatives, Asian elephants. This is crucial. Scientists could potentially use an elephant egg and an elephant surrogate mother. The genetic difference between a mammoth and an Asian elephant is relatively small, much smaller than between a dinosaur and any living bird. Even so, the challenges are immense. Success is not guaranteed, and there are still many ethical debates surrounding mammoth de-extinction. But it is a far more plausible scientific endeavor than dinosaur cloning. These projects help us refine cloning techniques and understand ancient genomes better. What about all those tiny shattered pieces of dinosaur DNA? While they can't be used to build a whole dinosaur, they are not useless. Scientists can study these ancient DNA fragments. By comparing them with the DNA of modern animals, especially birds and reptiles, we can learn incredible things. We can learn more about how dinosaurs are related to modern species. We can understand parts of their biology, their evolution, and how they adapted to their world. This field, called paleogenomics, is like a form of genetic archaeology. It helps us piece together the story of life on Earth. So the dream of walking with dinosaurs, as seen in movies, will likely remain a dream. The scientific barriers, from DNA decay to the lack of suitable surrogates, are simply too vast for today's technology, and perhaps for any future technology. However, the science of studying ancient life is very much alive and advancing. We can learn from the echoes of these magnificent creatures, from the faint genetic whispers they left behind. This knowledge enriches our understanding of evolution, of our planet's history, and of our own place within the grand ongoing story of life. The real adventure is not in recreating the past, but in understanding it more deeply.